This is the Mop Up. I'm David Feldman in New York City. Thank you so much for joining me. Please hit the like button. That's the best way for me to stay in your feed. Check out davidfeldmanshow.com for all your information. Well, the midterms are now 68 days away. Early voting in some states begin in 58 days. And mail-in ballots, despite the Supreme Court intentionally leaving states in a holding pattern on mail-in ballots, well, they start getting mailed out in some states next week. Hey, we're already beginning to taste a hint of what's in store for us. The Republican governor of Wyoming, Mark Gordon, complaining publicly today about the behavior exhibited by election observers sent by the Justice Department to monitor Tuesday's primary in that state. Gordon telling NBC News, quote, "It sounded like the behavior of those observers was a bit aggressive. It just was irregular, and I've asked the Attorney General to start looking into, kind of the nature of the visits and all that sort of stuff." That's in a deep red state. Already the voter intimidation, already the election official intimidation. In Maine, Bobby Charles, the Republican candidate for governor, says he wants ICE and U.S. Marshals on the ground in May during the midterms. He says he wants them inside the main polling stations to what? Make sure immigrants don't vote? Maine Secretary of State pointing out it's against the law for federal agents to be inside Maine polling precincts. Charles is losing in the latest polls to his Democratic opponent, Hannah Pingree. That's the race for governor of Maine. Trump isn't helping Republicans in Maine any. He's creating distraction after distraction. Earlier today, he announced he's renaming Lake Ontario. Oddly enough, he's going to call it the Gulf of Mexico. No, he's renaming it Lake America as he wages another needless trade war, this time with Canada, because authoritarians must be in a constant state of crisis. We must always be in a constant state of war. There must always be an imaginary enemy for authoritarians. Now it's Canadians. Only Donald Trump could figure out a way to scapegoat Canadians. So this might help him politically, but he's not on the ballot. Republicans are, and that's not helping him at all. Puts Trump in a bit of a pickle politically because he's become radioactive. So has J.D. Vance. Earlier this week, our vice president was in Maine campaigning on behalf of Republican incumbent Senator Susan Collins, who has been trailing in the polls all year. Normally, when a vice president stops by to campaign on your behalf, you would welcome him. But Susan Collins did not appear with J.D. Vance. She didn't even acknowledge he was in her state on her behalf. That's because she can't win if Maine voters associate her with Trump. Now, on Thursday, Collins agreed to 4 debates with her Democratic opponent, Troy Jackson. I don't think that is a good idea for Susan Collins. I don't think it's good for her to debate 4 times and remind voters who she is. This trade war with Canada is destroying Maine's economy, and with it, Donald Trump's Republican base. Maine depends on our neighbors to the north to buy lobster, lumber, potatoes, blueberries. And don't forget all the Canadian tourists who visit Maine each summer to take in the gun violence. Well, this year they're not coming. They're staying home. Democrats are now in striking distance of the Senate. They need a net gain of 4 seats. Iowa and Ohio are now considered toss-ups. I know. Right now, don't get your hopes up. Right now, Maine and North Carolina look imminently flippable. I don't see Iowa, but Trump just lowered tariffs on beef imports. That's enraged ranchers and farmers. At the same time, that trade war with Canada means farmers in Iowa have one less customer, not to mention the cost of fertilizer and diesel all soaring thanks to Donald Trump blockading the Strait of Hormuz. Iowa, now a toss-up. They say, I don't know. Ohio, also now a toss-up. That Senate seat possibly could flip from red to blue. Trump is sabotaging the incumbent John Husted in Ohio. Trump was told by the Republican Party to shut up about data centers. He was shown the internals that 60% of all Republican voters, and it's much higher in rural and suburban districts, they're getting a red light flashing that about 60% of Republican voters will either stay home on election day or not vote for a Republican if it's the party that stands for data centers. But Trump still bragging, won't stop bragging about data centers, how he's turned the economy around with all these data centers. Well, farmers, suburban moms don't want data centers in their backyards. They're ugly, they're noisy, they consume mounds of energy, they suck up water, and they drain the energy grid, which drives up the costs for heat and electricity. But there's Donald Trump sabotaging down ballot candidates. He refuses to shut up about the nearly $1 trillion companies like Facebook, Google, and Oracle are pouring into the U.S. economy to build these AI data centers. They're ugly, they're bad for wherever they are, and they create even worse jobs. They create temporarily good construction jobs, but once they're built, they're not good for the economy. So, again, I'm not trying to get your hopes up. I'm just telling you what the landscape is right now. Texas Republican Governor Greg Abbott is running for re-election. His race is now being moved into the toss-up column. I'm just telling you what's happening. I'm not saying, hey, we're going to win. I'm telling you, Greg Abbott, I never thought I would say this, Greg Abbott, his race is now in the toss-up column. Why? AI data centers, for one. I'll get to the other stuff in a second. He just announced a halt on all new data centers in Texas until he can be certain they won't drain his state's already shaky electrical grid. In other words, he's going to wait until after he's reelected and then go ahead with the data centers. Again, nobody ever thought Texas Governor Greg Abbott's reelection would be in the toss-up column. So he's got a problem with, Greg Abbott has a problem with data centers, and he has a problem with the Latino vote. I'll get to that in a second. The race for Senate in Texas is now in the toss-up column. But all the polls are showing Democratic state legislator James Tallarico leading Republican Attorney General of Texas, Ken Paxton. Now, Texas is going to break our hearts. I just don't see it. We've been here before, and I've been warning you, do not get your... She does not like you, Texas. She's not into you. She flirts with us, but then when you walk over and ask to dance, she spits in your face. So, can Tallarico, can he surprise us? He's got a plurality. He's not getting more than 50% of the vote. But there is a libertarian on the ballot who could drain some votes from Ken Paxton. Ken Paxton, incredibly unpopular, not just with voters, but with donors. Ken Paxton is not doing well. Tallarico is booking record donations, $30 million for the second quarter. Paxton can't get anyone to open their wallets. The Republican Senate Election Committee, run by South Carolina Senator Tim Scott, so far is holding back money for Paxton on the assumption they don't want to throw good cash after bad. Trump's Save America Super PAC is sitting on $500 million, most of which he has not touched. And Texas donors are saying, hey, you gave us Ken Paxton, you pay for it. We had incumbent Senator, Republican John Cornyn in Texas, who would have cruised to victory in November, but you primaried him out of office due to your petty grievances. So you fix this. You fix it. Well, Trump may only be able to make it worse. In fact, that's normally how things work with Donald Trump. He creates a problem and then he makes it worse. Paxton is a problem. Paxton is radioactive, but so is Trump, especially down in Texas, especially with Hispanic voters. So this is where it gets really interesting. Now, Trump did really well, surprisingly well, with Hispanic voters in 2024. It was jaw-dropping. But we saw a special election in the Texas State Senate where Democratic candidate Taylor Remick flipped Texas State Senate District 9. This was this year, January 31st. Remick beat his Republican opponent by 14 points. It was a landslide in a district Trump carried by 17 points. That is earth-shattering. 31%. That's a 31% swing away from Republicans 1 year after Trump returned to the Oval Office. And then when you look into the internals of District 9, where you saw the shift, Latino voters are abandoning the Republican Party because Trump and Stephen Miller, I guess, alienated them. I haven't been paying attention. So, again, don't get your hopes up. But it might be possible that Texas is a lot weaker right now for Republicans, specifically because of the cruelty behind Donald Trump's and the Republican Party's immigration policy. It's different this time. It is much crueler, much more sadistic this time around. Okay, so you got to remember, all Democrats need in the House, I'm going to get back to the Senate, they need a net gain of 3 to take back the House of Representatives, right? Okay. Texas, in late 2025, redrew its maps to find more reliably red congressional seats. Well, in order to do that, you have to dilute solid red congressional districts, meaning making them a little more vulnerable. It slightly altered Texas 15. Okay? Now, Texas 15 right now is 81% Hispanic. And it was like that before they redrew it. But there are no black voters in Texas 15. It's about 15% white. And it's a deep red congressional district. Trump carried it by 18 points in 2024. This district has now been moved into the toss-up column. Bobby Polito, a Latin Grammy winner, he is huge in Tejano music. He comes from a world-famous Tejano music family. He is now leading Republican Congresswoman Monica de la Cruz in the latest polls by 5%. What's going on? Now, a lot of Democrats, including me, never really understood the Latino vote. We used to think it was monolithic, and then we learned through Trump, actually, they don't all vote in one block. It's more complicated than that. Now, Trump carried the Latino vote in Texas by 11% in 2024, even more among Latino men. Latino men broke huge for Donald Trump. But this was before they started getting targeted by ICE and Border Patrol. Texas is 40% Hispanic, and that population is growing. Only 26% of the entire Hispanic population that can vote votes, but that's increasing. Trump won their vote in 2024, but not in 2020. Biden carried the Hispanic vote in Texas by 17 points. Now, Biden still lost Texas. That wasn't enough. But Biden beat Trump in 2020 among Latino voters by 17 percentage points, because that was back in 2020 when Latino voters saw firsthand Trump's cruel immigration policies. Then 4 years later, I suspect, when Trump was running against Harris, they might have forgotten who Trump was, which is why this time he won the Latino vote, getting 11% more than Harris. But these midterms are just like 2020, because the Hispanic voters in Texas are remembering who Donald Trump is. And what's different now than it was in 2020 is there are more Latino voters today than there were in 2020. How many will turn out for the midterms? I don't know. But how many who vote for Trump will stay home? And there are more Latino voters, and they are getting arrested. They are American citizens who are being detained. This wasn't happening in 2020 when Biden got, how many more votes? Where are my notes here? Biden carried it by 17 points. The immigration policy wasn't like this in 2020 and 2019. So the wild card in all this is, how are the Latino voters in Texas going to turn out? That accounts for the huge swings we're seeing in special elections in places like Texas. Again, we're talking about Texas Greg Abbott's reelection. It's now a toss-up, so they say. But he's not helping his case any with the Latino vote when it comes to the extradition of ICE agent Christian Castro, who has been charged in the state of Minnesota with assault after he was caught on video shooting Julio Cesar Sauceles through a closed door, shot him through a closed door earlier this year during Operation Metro Surge in Minnesota. It was Castro who purportedly lied to Minnesota police and ICE by saying he had been attacked by Celis with a snow shovel and that he fired in self-defense. But video showed otherwise. And even the director of ICE said Christian Castro lied about the incident. Thankfully, Celis survived the shooting, and Castro, an ICE agent, became a fugitive from justice who fled to Texas, where he was arrested by the Texas Rangers working with Minnesota law enforcement. For the past 90 days, he's been held inside Cameron County Jail down in Texas. And for 90 days, Minnesota demanded that Texas Governor Greg Abbott extradite Christian Castro to face charges, to go on trial. And Governor Greg Abbott refused to extradite Christian Castro, despite Castro being an obvious flight risk. On Thursday morning at 7 a.m., ICE agent Christian Castro was released from the Cameron County Jail in Texas. He is now a free man, wanted in Minnesota. Unbelievable. This is unbelievable that he's an ICE agent. I don't see how Greg Abbott wins the Hispanic vote sheltering an ICE agent who lied and about firing a gun into the door of, I believe he was a Nicaraguan. He's a Nicaraguan national. I don't know where Celis is from. I think he from Nicaragua originally. Meanwhile, Oswaldo Perella, a catching coach for the San Diego Padres, arrested at the El Paso, Texas International Airport on August 16th, and he has been held inside an El Paso ICE detention facility, finally released on Tuesday. 10 days behind bars. Why? Because he wasn't traveling through Texas with his work authorization papers, something ICE agents could have easily determined were in order just by checking their database. But no, you got to lock them up. There's money in locking people up. 10 days behind bars, innocent, no criminal record, 2 children who are American citizens, coaches for the San Diego Padres. Doesn't look good politically. Forget the morality. Forget the venality. Just politically, not a good look if you're trying to court the Hispanic vote in El Paso. Luis Manuel Aviles, the father of a sailor on board the long-suffering USS Abraham Lincoln. Just when you think the story about the USS Abraham Lincoln can't get any worse, Luis Manuel Aviles finally released from ICE custody. This is the father of a sailor on board the long-suffering USS Abraham Lincoln. His father finally got released from ICE custody after getting arrested last Saturday by Border Patrol officers during a routine traffic stop in Key West, Florida. Now think about this. They're calling it a routine traffic stop by Border Patrol officers in Key West, Florida. There is nothing routine about Border Patrol or ICE agents conducting traffic stops. This is a new phenomenon. Everybody thinks, oh yeah, this happens. No, it doesn't. This is a new thing. Being pulled over by ICE agents? No criminal record. Aviles is an immigrant from Nicaragua, so I don't know where Salas is from. I apologize. But Aviles, the father of the sailor, is a Nicaraguan immigrant with a Social Security card, work authorization permit, and a pending asylum hearing, which he must be granted by both domestic and international law. If someone is seeking asylum from Nicaragua, of all places, he deserves a hearing. Not deserves, legally, he's entitled to a hearing. But nope. Stephen Miller says, throw him out. Throw him out. If the Hispanic vote swings the midterms, it will be, in some districts, partly, if not entirely, because of what are called Kavanaugh stops. Kavanaugh stops. Last year, Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh wrote a temporary decision granting ICE and Border Patrol temporary permission to perform routine traffic stops all over the country. These aren't routine. We never had this before. It used to be, ask your Hispanic friends about this. It used to be that Border Patrol, not ICE, Border Patrol, could perform traffic stops along the border. Since the 70s, the Supreme Court ruled, okay, Border Patrol, if they see some articulable facts, they're allowed to pull somebody over along the border. I think it's like within 50 miles of the border. There's been a drastic shift because of Trump, because of the Supreme Court, and specifically because of Brett Kavanaugh. Now, ICE and Border Patrol agents are allowed temporarily to pull over anywhere, anyone, on the suspicion of being in this country illegally. There's no such thing as a routine traffic stop performed by a Border Patrol agent or an ICE agent. This all started last year. It was going on a little, not like this, and not all over the country, and not based on this temporary Kavanaugh decision. So, this is what Brett Kavanaugh wrote. I think it was like September of last year, October of last year. He said, it's perfectly okay for ICE agents or Border Patrol officers to perform a traffic stop anywhere in the country, but they must have what are called articulable facts to base their suspicion that the person they're about to pull over is not a U.S. citizen. Now, there are about, I don't have them in front of me, there are about a dozen articulable facts that can justify a traffic stop. Kavanaugh says you need about 3 out of a dozen to justify pulling someone over if you're a Border Patrol agent or an ICE agent. According to Brett Kavanaugh, the articulable facts can include a person's pigmentation. You can take into effect, are they not white? Their accent, their facility with the English language. Do they speak with a Spanish accent? What kind of clothes are they wearing? And what kind of work are they doing? Not only that, where and whom they are hanging out with. That's what Brett Kavanaugh said is an articulable fact to justify pulling over a Hispanic person, basically. Well, there are a lot of Hispanic voters down in Texas and around the country who voted for Trump and are now getting pulled over by his Gestapo. This is different from the first go-around with Stephen Miller and Tom Homan and Donald Trump. The second term is far different because of this Supreme Court, because of Brett Kavanaugh. So the conditions leading up to Donald Trump losing the Hispanic vote in Texas to Joe Biden by 17 points, they're a lot worse than they were when Biden won the Hispanic vote in Texas by 17 points. I don't think Texas is flipping blue, but I don't know anything. And I certainly don't know a damn thing about the Latino vote. But I do know that the Latino vote is growing. Every election cycle, it becomes more and more of a deciding factor in Texas politics. And Donald Trump, the Republican Party, in the past year and a half, has done more than just remind Latino voters who they are. If you're a Latino voter in Texas, you know exactly who ICE and Border Patrol are, and you're carrying your proof of citizenship at all times. Back in 2020, when Joe Biden won the Latino vote by 17 points, it wasn't anywhere close to what we have right now. Now, common sense. Oh, sorry,
I'm a man with great common sense.
Yes, you are. Common sense dictates.
A lot of people are saying maybe we like a dictator.
Right. Okay. Well, common sense dictates a massive swing away from Trump among Latino voters. But this is Trump who is antithetical to common sense.
I'm a man with great common sense.
Now, I don't know where Democrats find 4 Senate seats that they can flip. I just don't see it. I don't. Maybe Alaska. Maybe. Remember, we're talking a net gain of 4. So they can't lose Georgia. It's beginning to look like incumbent Democrat Jon Ossoff is cruising to re-election and then launching his presidential bid. They can't lose Michigan. That's a Democratic seat currently held by Peters. he's retiring. Dr. Abdul El Sayed is the Democratic nominee. This is tight, turning into pure Islamophobia, which is just getting worse and worse and worse. This is the Mop Up. I'm David Feldman in New York City. Thank you so much for joining me. If you're enjoying any of today's program, and this is certainly better than the last one. That last one was a 2-hour stinker. That was as bad as whatever Trump's got in his pants. But this is, I think, a much better show. Please share it. Please like it. Subscribe to my newsletter. Subscribe to this channel. If you want to read what I read, go to davidfeldmanshow.com, hit show prep. If you would like to host your own podcast, you can download my show notes over at davidfeldmanshow.com, and you can use my facts and figures to host your own study group or your own podcast or anyway. Okay. If this is the calm before the storm, then we're in for a nonstop series of Category 5 political hurricanes right after Labor Day. Enjoy the summer doldrums. Summer doldrums, by the way, are literally a meteorological term for the calm before the hurricanes. The doldrums are the weak and quiet winds hovering over the equator right now throughout our summer, Australia's so-called winter. I don't believe it. I think they're lying when they say they celebrate winter now, but so they claim. And the doldrums calmly move away from the equator. They start heading north, and they turn into deadly hurricanes. That's what the summer doldrums are. So enjoy Labor Day. Enjoy, relax. It's going to be great. No, it's not. I wish I could make you happy. I wish I could tell you everything is going to be okay. It isn't okay now. So why would I get your hopes up? And even as I'm about to discuss, even if we win in November, as we saw on January 6th, and as we're really going to see on January 3rd, that don't mean Donald Trump is going to accept the results. Now, some of you might be old enough to remember Bush v. Gore. Some of you, I hope, remember January 6th. So after Labor Day, after Labor Day and January 3rd, when the 120th Congress is supposed to get sworn in, we're going to be living through an exponential magnitude of Bush v. Gore times January 6th. Unless you get to work. Unless we see on November 3rd a total and sweeping repudiation of Donald Trump and his Republican Party. But it's got to be gigantic. It's got to be gigantic. If Democrats win back the House by the same margin Republicans currently hold, that's 3 seats, razor thin, I promise you, there is no way Mike Johnson, one of the king of the election deniers, he will never give up the gavel to Hakeem Jeffries. Trump won't let him. And if it's a razor thin majority that the Democrats win, you will hear nothing other than voter fraud. You will see state election officials, especially in Republican districts. Now, a lot of election deniers have become election officials in red states. They will be pressured and threatened not to certify any election where a candidate flipped a seat from red to blue. Now, the Senate is different. The Senate is a little different. If Democrats win the Senate, there's really nothing Trump is going to be able to do to stop that. I'll explain why in a second. It's kind of interesting. And I'd rather go over this now than when it's happening. Because what happens in Bush v. Gore, what happened on January 6th with, is Mike Pence constitutionally mandated to certify, all that stuff, that civics lesson, it becomes fascinating to the media because they're learning about it for the first time, and so is the voter. So we get caught up in the civics and don't notice that this is a slow motion coup d'etat. So I'm going to go over this because they're gaming, the Republicans have gamed this out. And a lot of people like me are gaming it out. Like I talked about the rogue clerk in the House of Representatives. And I did some research. I talked to some people, and then I'm thumbing through the news yesterday. On the same day I'm talking about the rogue clerk of the House of Representatives, suddenly I'm seeing articles about the rogue clerk. They're not listening to my show and going, oh, the rogue clerk. No, everybody's coming to this realization that Mike Johnson is going to fire the clerk, and the clerk, House clerk, will not seat Democratic members of the House of Representatives who are there for the first time because they flipped a red congressional district blue. Okay, divide and conquer. Divide and conquer, divide and conquer. That's how you stay in power. And one of the ways of dividing is creating so much chaos. The country is divided on what's real, what's fake, and most importantly, what's important versus what is trivial. You divide and conquer by getting Americans to debate frivolous issues like, did Hassan Piker really threaten the Jew? No, he didn't. Read the quote. I thought the same exact thing that Hassan Piker was thinking. It's called blowback. I'm not going to get into it because Hassan Piker is a distraction. But if you know what I'm talking about, it's called blowback. But debate the frivolous instead of the real issue. So that's how you divide. To some degree, Donald Trump, to some degree, has divided the Democratic Party. We don't need much help from Donald Trump. But he is an authoritarian. And because the Democratic leadership offers voters nothing to counter the charms of fascism, we are seeing the Democratic Socialists of America spreading. According to the odious New Jersey Democratic Congressman Josh Gottheimer, like a cancer. This is a Democrat calling the Democratic Socialists un-American and a cancer. Josh Gottheimer, my sister's congressman who won't hold town hall meetings. So, right now, it looks like the Democratic Socialists of America running candidates inside the Democratic Party. So this is a party in and of itself running candidates inside the Democratic Party. They have succeeded, at the very least, in guaranteeing 7 members inside the new Congress. They will not just be Democratic Socialists, but members of the Democratic Socialists of America. We've never seen anything like this in American history. We saw Eugene Debs, a socialist, run for president over and over again. He ended up going to prison. He never got elected. We've seen Ron Dellums, who from Oakland and Berkeley. I voted for him. He flirted with the DSA. Bernie, but he's not a member of the DSA. We have never had members of Congress who are also members of the Democratic Socialists of America. This is a party that is, Michael Harrington, I think that's his name, kind of created the Democratic Socialists with the Students for the SDS. So it's morphed into the Democratic Socialists of America since Reagan, let's say. But we've never seen anything like this before. Now, there are no Democratic Socialists of America, the party, inside our Senate. Bernie Sanders is a Democratic Socialist, but he's not a member of the Democratic Socialists of America. Dr. Abdul El Sayed, running for the Senate in Michigan, is not DSA by any stretch of the imagination. I saw, I don't know, was it USA Today identified him as a DSA candidate? He's a capitalist. He says, I'm a capitalist. No affiliation with the DSA. Last week, Florida state legislator, this is really interesting, and I hope you're paying attention to this, okay? Last week, Florida state legislator Angie Nixon won the Democratic nomination for Senate in Florida, running as a Democratic Socialist. Not only that, running as a member of the Democratic Socialists of America. We've never had a Democratic Socialist of America member running as the Democratic nominee for Senate. She says, after she won, I'm not a socialist. She joined the Democratic Socialists of America in June of this year. This is getting really interesting. And if you're my age, if you're a baby boomer, I think we're missing something here. We don't see what's going on. So if you're my age, you want to pay attention to this. Okay. Why did Angie Nixon join the DSA in June? She's a politician. She thinks it's a good move politically. What's happening right now in the Democratic Party is Newtonian. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. If Trump is going to go full bore fascist, it only follows, the physics dictate that Democrats go full bore socialist. But here's the problem. Here is the problem. In America, fascism and socialism are dirty words. I don't write the rules of the game, but I'm telling you, fascism and socialism are dirty words. I don't write the rules of the game. And what I'm about to tell you is the rules of the game might be changing. So please pay attention to this. Fascism, as you know, is a dirty word. Socialism, as you know, is not. The rules of the game are right now, both are dirty words. And Republicans are winning the language battle. They're smart. They control the language. They would never call themselves what they are. They're fascists. But that's what they are. By every empirical standard, if you test it using the scientific method, yes, Republicans are fascists. And again, up until the Japanese attacked us on December 7th, fascism was on the menu. Okay, you have a president who is a fascist. General John Kelly, his chief of staff, said he's a fascist. The former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Mark Milley, said, yeah, he's a fascist by the definition of what a fascist is. But they don't call themselves a fascist. It's a dirty word. We now have Democrats calling themselves socialists, but they're not. Angie Nixon just became a member of the DSA. Now, Bernie and AOC call themselves Democratic Socialists, which is different from being a socialist. It means they believe in democracy everywhere, including the workplace, the family. It's all about democracy. State ownership of the means of production isn't on the menu with these people. Maybe city-owned groceries in New York City. They believe there's room for private enterprise. They believe there's room for corporations. There's even room for rich people. It's not hypocritical to say, oh, he comes from a rich family and he's a democratic socialist. What a hypocrite. You don't take a vow of poverty when you're a socialist. You demand the billionaires take a vow of poverty. Every socialist movement was led by the intelligentsia, most of whom are college educated, and came, at least in the 19th century and early 20th century, from what was left of the aristocracy. It's the privileged elite, the children of the privileged elite, who are the ones who are the instruments of socialism. It's far from hypocritical for Bernie Sanders to be worth several $1 million. He doesn't have anything against somebody having a couple of $1 million. It's the billionaires. That's who AOC is. That's who Bernie is. That's who most democratic socialists are. So what we have going into the midterms is an incredibly stupid country. And we have Republicans who are fascists, who want everything the fascists wanted here in America right up until the Japanese bombed us, and then fascism became a dirty word. The closest Republicans come to calling themselves fascist is America Firsters. When you look back at the pre-war fascist movement in this country, some called themselves fascists, some called themselves Nazis, but then you had Charles Lindbergh and Father Coughlin. They were the America Firsters. That was palatable to some Americans who found the term fascism or Nazi distasteful. America First and Trump, MAGA, this new breed of Republicans, call themselves America Firsters. That's where the term comes from. It's code for fascist. America Firster, that's a code for I'm a fascist. The Republicans are very disciplined when it comes to messaging, and they're way too disciplined to ever use a word that is verboten. Can't use the word fascist. Democratic socialists, on the other hand, are not socialists. They are not communists. But unlike the Republicans, they call themselves what they're not. Socialists, democratic socialists. So you've got the Republicans who really are fascists not calling themselves fascists, and you have democratic socialists who are not really socialists calling themselves socialist. Republicans know not to use the word fascist. We have Democrats, some Democrats, who are using the word socialist, which they're either making a mistake or they're rewriting the rules of American politics. I think they're rewriting the rules of American politics. And I think if you're my age, you don't understand what's going on. So I want practically everything the Democratic Socialists of America want. I just don't want to call it socialism because I'm playing by the old rules. To some extent, Angie Nixon, Senate candidate for Florida, winning, she's a Democratic Socialist, winning the Senate seat in Florida. Now, I hope she wins. I don't think that's going to happen. But she's she's straddling the new rules and the old rules, where she says, I'm not a socialist, but I am a member of the Democratic Socialists. She's trying to, it's a cross-generational move. Now, I can assure you, I don't think she's going to win. I just don't. I donate to her, support her, pray for her. But most likely, she's going to lose because black people are not allowed to vote in Florida. Not because she's the black candidate, but black voters break for the Democratic Party big time. And that's why they're not allowed to vote in Florida. And let's say she's going to lose, and I suspect she will. That defeat will be blown out of proportion by the Democratic establishment. You'll hear Josh Gottheimer and the problem solvers, James Carr. Oh, we could have won Florida. We could have won Florida had the moderate Alex Vindman been the nominee instead of Angie Nixon. But no. The DSA is a cancer, and they stuck us with Angie Nixon, and that's why we lost the race in Florida. And then, and I'm going to butcher this name, this week we found a similar future scapegoat in Deep Red, Oklahoma. The official Democratic nominee this week for Senate in Deep Red, Oklahoma, is a woman, Nikayla Jasmine Thomas. I'm butchering her first name. Nikayla, I think I got that right. She's a Democratic socialist. She, a nurse, defeated Jim Priest, an attorney, a centrist, despite the centrist attorney, Jim Priest, outspending the nurse, the Democratic socialist, by 1,000,000-1. We saw the same thing in Florida. Nixon outspent 1,000,000-1 by Vindman. So I don't think Thomas is going to be the next senator from Oklahoma. I don't think she's going to flip a reliably red Senate seat blue. And if Democrats fail to win back the Senate or the House, they will be scapegoated by the Democratic establishment. Democrats will point to Thomas and Nixon. People like Josh Gottheimer will say they scared the electorate into voting for Republicans. You know Josh Gottheimer, Carville, David Axelrod, all the Democrats who have a vested interest in maintaining the status quo, and the status quo being Democrats are the minority party, they will cherry pick the results and isolate two reliably red Senate seats where the candidates are DSA, and they'll go, that's why we lost. No, if we lose, it's because of douchebags like Josh Gottheimer who create the conditions for fascists to rise up, because you have to counter authoritarian lies with real progressive legislation like Medicare for all, Josh Gottheimer. Okay. Now, I don't know enough about anything like I have to tell my listeners that. I never thought, let's see, it's a year ago. When did Mamdani got elected? In November of 2025? If you asked me a year ago, I never thought that a year ago, I'd be living with the greatest mayor of any city in the world, Zohran Mamdani. I voted for him, but I never thought he'd win in New York City. So let me address the boomers. There are very few things about getting old that are great. But for me, one of the most enjoyable things about getting older is the realization the world spins with or without my permission. And I watch Mamdani, I watch AOC, who are young enough to be my children, and I realize, oh, they're in charge. And maybe if I behave myself and keep my mouth shut and don't lecture them about what the rules of engagement are, maybe they'll take care of me. Even though, considering the mess my generation left them with, I certainly don't deserve their compassion. My political instincts are filled with the rot of old assumptions. My instinct is back away from the word socialism. Back away from the Democratic Socialists of America. I love them, I'm for them, but they're trouble. They have a messaging problem. That is years, layers and layers of self-delusion. The DSA has a messaging problem? Really, David? The DSA has a messaging problem. You get on the ice floe, David, and you just drift off and be with your ancient ancestors, because the DSA is doing just fine. They are. I know that because AOC has rejoined the Democratic Socialists of America's national chapter. She rejoined it this month. I read that, I went, huh? Now, why would she do that? Well, she is rewriting the rules. She's eyeing either a run for president in 2028 or Chuck Schumer's Senate seat in 2028. Here's how it's going to play out. And this, I don't know much, but this I know. If Democrats don't win back the Senate, AOC is going to run for Senate in 2028 and unseat Chuck Schumer, who's up for re-election. He's one of the most unpopular politicians in America. Now, if Democrats win the Senate, then she runs for president in 2028. That's what she's doing. Is she going to get elected president? That I don't know. I think she gets elected if they don't. I think if the Democrats don't take back the Senate, she's the next senator from New York. So this is what really surprised me about AOC. And I thought, wait a second, she's doing something. She is so far ahead of me. I figured out of political expediency, AOC would continue to distance herself from the DSA, which she has been doing. Up until this month, AOC only retained her membership inside the New York chapter of the DSA, but her membership to the national chapter of the DSA famously lapsed 8 years ago, right around the time she got elected to the House. Why? Well, there's been a split between AOC and the national DSA, specifically over her support for Israel. Politically speaking, AOC is as smart as Mamdani and Bernie. She is one of the most popular politicians in America. You don't know this because they don't want you to know. But I've gone over this. I learned this from Ralph Nader. Bernie is the number one politician currently serving in office in America. Consistently. You don't know that, do you? No. You're not allowed. They don't want you to know who you are, America. But Bernie is the most popular government official in America. Number two, Mamdani. He just jumped up there. And for the past 3 or 4 years, AOC has been coming in at 3 or 4. When you poll Americans on who they love the most, which government official they love the most, Bernie always tops the list. That's why you never hear about these polls. You know who's not in the top 10? Trump, Vance, Harris and Biden, when they were president and vice president, weren't in the top 10. Hakeem Jeffries, Chuck Schumer, Mike Johnson, John Thune, Mitch McConnell, not in the top 10. The absolute top is Barack Obama, but he's not a candidate. He's a political figure, but he's not a government official anymore, unless Trump runs again. It's the poll they never report because we're not supposed to know how we truly feel. We're told how we feel. So AOC is preternaturally smart, as is Mamdani, as is Bernie. And they see things that people like me refuse to see, set in their ways. Socialism is a dirty word. Socialism is a dirty word. Of course I'm a socialist, but it's a dirty word. Say you're a Roosevelt Democrat. Say you're a Lyndon Johnson. Don't say you're a socialist. If AOC runs for Senate or president, what's her gambit here? Apparently, she's going to rewrite the rules and force socialism on the ballot the same way Bernie in 2020 forced Medicare for all on the ballot. First they laugh at you, right? And then now the Hakeem Jeffries just said, I do not support Medicare for all. So taking on the health insurance lobbyists, it's amazing how far Bernie got. And I think, we all know you cannot win the debate against Medicare for all. I think, I don't know anything. I think looking back, Bernie says to AOC, I should have forced socialism on the ballot back in 2020. The country wasn't ready, but Medicare for all was incrementalism. I should have just forced the debate on socialism. The country's too stupid to have that debate, but the rules are being rewritten because I think what AOC, Mamdani, Bernie, what they've realized is if you put socialism on the ballot and say, yeah, I'm a socialist, let's debate it, it forces the Democratic establishment and the Republicans to defend this kleptocracy, whatever economic system you want to call this money grab disguised as capitalism. Now, one of the things I keep repeating over and over, and I think this resonates with voters, capitalism has failed everywhere we've tried it. They're going to say socialism has failed everywhere they've tried it. You've heard me go over this, so I'm not going to repeat it, but capitalism has failed everywhere it's been tried. It failed in 2008. It failed in 2020. It failed in 1929. It fails all the time. The savings and loan scandal. Capitalism always fails, and it's always the government that bails out capitalism. Ask the people who live in Norway, Sweden, Denmark, France, if socialism has failed everywhere it's been tried. Better yet, ask China. China is so successful, they've rewritten the books to redefine what communism is. China is not a capitalist country. Yes, they allow entrepreneurs, they allow a little free market, but it's anything but capitalism. So as the great Henry Hakamaki said, whenever people say capitalism has lifted more people out of poverty than any other system, they're including China when they say that. But it wasn't capitalism that lifted the Chinese out of poverty. It was socialism. Henry. I miss Henry. I miss a lot of people. So, yeah, I think people from my generation, irrelevant, were guided by, we fancy ourselves, historical analysis. That's what we like to say. It's historical analysis, which we mistake for wisdom. No, when you start offering historical analysis, it means you're stuck in the past and you have no fresh ideas. People from my generation, not all, but well-intentioned boomers get unnerved by the thought of an election that comes down to fascism versus socialism. This is how Trump is framing the midterms. And AOC is saying, let's go. Let's debate it. And it scares me because I'm looking backwards. I look at parliamentary elections from the past in Europe, where that is a literal choice. And when voters choose between fascists and the socialists, too often the fascists win. Now, my historical analysis is deeply flawed because it really comes down to the Reichstag, Nazi Germany. And I have a confirmation bias. I filter all historical analysis of democratic politics through the prism of how did Hitler happen? So I'm sure if you study all the parliamentary elections, you won't come down with this conclusion that I have. But based on my obsession with Nazi Germany, it's one of the things I have in common with our current president. This is just based on Hitler's rise to power. There are more people. Okay, in the lead up to Hitler taking command, there were more people opposed to fascism than for it. And in America, there are more Americans opposed to fascism than for it. But the problem is fascists are monolithic, meaning there are no moderate fascists. I'm for some extermination, not total annihilation. Don't be greedy, just kill a couple. There's no such thing as a centrist, a moderate fascist, meaning in this country and in Nazi Germany, the fascists were guaranteed 30%, maybe 37% of the vote in practically any election where it basically comes down to fascism versus not fascism, versus socialism, versus liberalism. See, the difference between fascists and the people on the left is the left is huge. They're gray areas. You got your left. You got your leftists, you got your socialists, you got your democratic socialists, you got your Marxists, your communists, your anarchists, your syndicalists, the Bolsheviks, the Maoists, the Trotskyites, the Hittites, the Canaanites, the Millerites. Millerites? Oh, that's a beer. And then you have liberals who are almost as bad as the fascists. In fact, they're worse because they think liberalism is somehow, like Bill Maher always talks about. Always confuses the left with liberals. It's not completely different. Anyway, the left, we have competing versions of how to build a utopia. The fascists, on the other hand, they all agree on how to build a utopia. I mean, if you ask the fascists in America, what's utopia, they'll tell you eliminate 100 million people who are living in America. They say we have 100 million people, and America will be perfect once we deport or lock them up. So, and I've been over that. They've said it out in the open. When election time comes around, at least in Nazi Germany, the anti-fascists will outnumber the Nazis. But eventually, because the fascists only belong to one party and the anti-fascists belong to 3 separate parties, the vote gets split and Hitler comes to power with a plurality. Right? If you added up the socialists, the Marxists, what the liberals, the Labor Party, whatever they had in Germany, they far outnumbered the Nazis, but they all couldn't get on the same page. Instead, they got on the train eventually. And that's how Hitler came to power. So a lot of people my age are allergic to the idea of an election coming down to fascism versus socialism. It may not be these midterms, but we may have if we have a presidential election in 2028, as big tech gobbles up everything, and they are, it will come down to fascism, possibly, versus socialism. And there are a lot of young people and people my age, and probably eventually me, who are going to say, all right, MFers, let's have the debate. Let's have it. And if you're obsessed with Nazi Germany the way I am, you worry that it doesn't end well. Well, I'm going to keep going. This is the Mop Up. I'm David Feldman in New York City. Thank you for joining me. Please like this episode so I remain in your feed. This is a much better show than the 2-hour cesspool that I passed off as a podcast on Tuesday. Not a good show. Not a good show. This is better. Things are not going well here in the United States. If you're watching overseas, help me. This year started, or at least the Iran war started, on February 28th with an inflation rate of just under 3%. But then Iran did the thinkable. They shut down the Strait of Hormuz, and now inflation is approaching 4% and climbing. In fewer than 2 years, Trump has added $4 trillion to our national debt, which now stands at $40 trillion. War, despite what they want you to believe, war is not a stimulus package. It doesn't create jobs. It's not good for the economy. But all this administration knows how to do is fight. It's not about winning. It's about fighting. Winning is inconsequential. It's all about staying in the fight. It is the fight is what counts. The man, Donald Trump, who lived his entire adult life in a perpetual state of battle, wouldn't know what to do with a moment's peace. And yet he won the 2024 election, promising to end our nation's forever wars. He's been in a forever war since he was born, and he has no idea how to open Hormuz. And somebody does, and he's about to destroy it. Hormuz, and I'm not going to show you the maps, Hormuz straddles two coasts, Iran's and Oman's. And right now, Oman and Iran are negotiating new rules for ships to pass through Hormuz. And Trump is not happy about this because those negotiations don't involve him. And they do involve some kind of toll disguised as a fee that must be paid by any ship trying to pass through Hormuz in direct violation of international law. Now, Trump was all for collecting a toll when he was in on it. But now that Oman and Iran are talking with one another and figuring out a way for Iran to collect some kind of fee to repair the damage from this war, Trump is ready to attack Oman. Oman plays the role of a neutral mediator in the Middle East. Its leaders, it's a Muslim country, but its leaders are neither Shia or Sunni, and that's one of the reasons it can present itself as kind of a Switzerland of the region, kind of like Qatar does. Right now, you have Donald Trump and you have J.D. Vance, both threatening to attack Oman because Oman, like the UAE, is willing to negotiate with Iran despite Iran hitting their refineries with drones and missiles during this 6 months war. Iran has turned into the big dog in the region. And what we could be looking at in the coming days is an agreement to open Hormuz, where Iran and Oman will charge ships some kind of maintenance fee, which they already do before the war, in order to pass through. And it will be disguised. It's a toll that will be disguised as a maintenance fee, which won't be in violation of international law. Trump will not accept this. And Marco Rubio will say it's unacceptable. It violates international law, which we know the United States under Trump has shown itself to be the indispensable custodian of. Nobody protects international law like this administration. Despite domestic and international law labeling this as a war crime, despite condemnation from all world leaders, Pete Hegseth resumed his illegal airstrikes on alleged narco-terrorists in the Caribbean this week. This after a 2-month pause. On Sunday, U.S. Southern Command destroyed a boat in the Eastern Pacific. They killed 2 on board. On Tuesday, Southern Command took out all 4 people on board a boat in the Caribbean. The Pentagon said the boat was carrying narco-terrorists, but as the Associated Press reported once again that the Pentagon offered absolutely no proof that these are narco-terrorists. And even if they are narco-terrorists, you don't kill them. That's against international law. Not only are these strikes, by definition, war crimes, they've also failed to stop the flow of drugs into our country. Well, of course they failed, because it's not about drugs. The reason Hegseth is demanding that the head of Southcom, General Francis L. Donovan, the reason that he's demanding that Donovan obey as well as deliver illegal orders down the chain of command, it's part of the purge. Hegseth is purging the military, not just of blacks and women. He's purging the military of anyone who is disloyal to him, Donald Trump, and who puts the Constitution before them, who puts the military code of conduct and the law before Pete Hegseth and Donald Trump. This is how you have a coup. This is how you get your military on board a coup. They know what they're doing. One of the ways to keep someone like General Francis L. Donovan loyal is by turning him into a war criminal just like yourself. Now, we've been over the midterms, the polling, and it might not go well for Republicans. All it takes is Democrats to win control of the House or the Senate, and that means one of two armed services committees will begin investigations into Operation Southern Spear. Those are the airstrikes in the Caribbean and the Eastern Pacific. They've amounted so far to at least 68 airstrikes in the Caribbean and Eastern Pacific that we know about, killing at least 227 people that we know about. And each one of those killings is a war crime, several war crimes, domestically and internationally. And every general, every single military personnel in the chain of command involved with those war crimes will be forced to answer for those war crimes if the 120th Congress is sworn in with Democrats in charge of either the Senate, the House, or both. So, how do you stage a coup? You make your military complicit in your war crimes so that the leaders of that military have a vested interest in keeping the opposition party from taking control of any investigatory arms inside Congress and eventually the Justice Department. That's how you do it. You have to turn your military into legions of war criminals who are terrified of a day of reckoning. So on January 6, 2021, Trump didn't have a military filled with war criminals. They weren't afraid of Joe Biden becoming president. The military wasn't afraid of Democrats controlling both houses of Congress. In fact, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Mark Milley, welcomed it. But now you have a military, as well as countless Department of Homeland Security officials, from ICE to Border Patrol. They're being led up and down the chain of command by criminals. That's how you orchestrate a coup. You force your military, your Department of Homeland Security, and several layers of the Justice Department to possess the very same incentive Trump has to not surrender any power, because you're going to go to prison. It's no longer just Trump who is thinking, I'm going to jail if Democrats take power. That's how you stage a coup. These airstrikes that Pete Hegseth is conducting have nothing to do with battling narco-terrorism. These are loyalty tests to find out who is willing to commit crimes in the name of our fearless leader. It is non-negotiable. You cannot argue that these airstrikes in the Caribbean and the Eastern Pacific are not war crimes. And the only reason they're being carried out is because they are, in fact, war crimes. And that implicates so many people inside the Pentagon. They now have a vested interest in not allowing Democrats to take control. Wasn't like this on January 6, 2021. It is now. Pete Hegseth is purging the military of anyone who follows the law instead of our dear leader. Army Chief of Staff General Randy George I'll explain to you what the Army Chief of Staff is in a second. He was fired in April of this year, and we're now learning the reason he was pushed out the door was because he continued a formal review of the Apache helicopter pilots who performed an illegal flyover, an illegal flybys, I think they call it. It was over the house of the Confederate flag-waving, N-word spewing friend of Bill Maher and Donald Trump's buddy, Kid Rock. Do you remember this? The pilots who did the flyby were suspended, but Hegseth immediately reinstated them through Twitter, posting, quote, "Pilot suspension lifted. No punishment, no investigation. Carry on, patriots." They did a little joyride, fly by Kid Rock's house. Perfectly acceptable. Carry on, patriots. So, the Army Chief of Staff, General Randy George, there he is. Well, he goes by the book. He continued to look into the flyby. He doesn't take orders via social media. And new reporting now shows that Pete Hegseth's closest advisor told the Army Chief of Staff to drop it. Don't look into this. Randy George, the Army Chief of Staff, went, "You don't tell me what to do." And so he was forced into early retirement, replaced by General Christopher Lenev. That would be the very same Hegseth loyalist who, through an act of insubordination, told General George to drop the investigation. And now General Christopher Lenev is the acting Army Chief of Staff. Not confirmed by the Senate the way General George was. Now, the Army Chief of Staff runs the Army. He is one of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And as of April 2nd, we now have a Trump loyalist running our entire Army, taking orders from Pete Hegseth, who celebrated the firing of the old chief of staff by joining Kid Rock on an Apache helicopter joyride over Virginia. Now, Kid Rock famously waves the Confederate flag during his concerts. There was a famous Rolling Stone interview with him a year or two ago where Kid Rock is spewing the N-word, saying, why do black people have a problem with my inordinate use of the N-word? You see the purges that are going on. Hegseth is purging the military of black officers, black generals. We had a black chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. First thing Trump and Hegseth did was replace him with Dan Kane, the entrepreneur. This is how you stage a coup. You purge the military of anyone who will refuse an illegal order. You contaminate the military with leaders who, because they obeyed and gave illegal orders, now have a vested interest in permanently preventing Democrats from coming to power, because that means you'll be prosecuted. In the mafia, you can't be trusted until you've made your bones. In the Trump administration or any authoritarian regime, you can't be trusted unless you're a criminal, just like the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, and our president, who is in fact a convicted felon. The Trump administration is a Ponzi scheme of crimes, a Ponzi scheme of muggers, rapists, criminals. It's a Ponzi scheme of criminals. The guys at the top, it's a Ponzi scheme. They keep getting rich. They keep accruing power so long as they're able to bring in new criminals into the government down below. Just find every criminal, and that's how you keep this criminal Ponzi scheme going. The website Just Security, it's called Just Security, has been keeping an eye on our illegal war against these so-called narco-terrorists. And it's a lot worse than we're being told. Or we are being told. It's just a lot worse than what we're hearing from mainstream media. There appears to be evidence that the CIA and our military are conducting secret ground operations, possibly in Ecuador and Guatemala, to target so-called drug cartels. There has been, I don't know who the sources are, but there's been some brave reporting in the American media that broke this story. This is a secondary source from Just Security. I will, on the next show, tell you the primary sources that Just Security was working off. It's in my notes. I can't find it. But this is, so I apologize to, and I'll name the reporters who have been breaking this story. So there is now pretty good evidence that the CIA and the Pentagon are conducting secret ground operations in Ecuador, Guatemala, to target drug cartels. And this, of course, requires congressional approval. But when has that ever stopped Donald Trump, or any president for that matter? Now, this month, Hegseth openly admitted that Colombia, under its new leadership, they got a new president this month, along with Guatemala, Honduras, and Ecuador, they have all agreed to allow American troops into their countries to assist their military in the war on drug cartels. Would you like to be consulted about this? I mean, we're losing a war in Iran. Should our troops be on the ground in Central and South America without at least Congress being consulted? How is this legally justified? Well, you have to remember there are also lawyers in the Justice Department. Sometimes you forget, but they're lawyers. They passed the bar, or at least they had somebody take the exam for them. We have lawyers inside our military, and they have a choice, and they've made it. They've either quit and protest. Some have, many have, but others have stayed. They've got bills to pay, or maybe they're just fascists. They compromised their integrity, or maybe they have no integrity to compromise. And what these lawyers do is prepare legal briefs to defend the indefensible. And that's what lawyers in America, that's why they go to law school, to defend the indefensible. That's what they're taught. Just Security reports that on October 1st, this guy, Earl Matthew, the Pentagon's top lawyer, he told the Senate Armed Services Committee in closed-door testimony that after Secretary of State Marco Rubio officially labeled Latin American drug cartels foreign terrorists, that allowed the president to order airstrikes and a ground invasion. Under the war authorization Congress granted the chief executive back in 2001 to fight a war on global terror. I've been over this with you. They keep renewing the 2001 war authorization to fight a war on global terror. This was passed right after 9/11. And since then, for the past nearly 25 years, presidents have used that authorization to wage war all over the globe, claiming we're fighting terrorists. Everybody's a terrorist. If you're their enemy, if they're your enemy, everybody's a terrorist. That's why Antifa just got labeled a domestic terrorist organization here in America, and a foreign terrorist organization, meaning the president is legally justified to phone in, airstrikes on Antifa, which doesn't exist? It doesn't exist. But if you're against fascism, does that make you Antifa? Yeah. It's anyone you want it to be. They know what they're doing. There's a playbook for this. They've gone over it. The CIA wrote it. We teach it. The School of the Americas. We taught it to El Salvador. We taught it to Honduras. We taught it to Ecuador. We know how to do this. We've been doing it before World War II. We know how to do this. And we're doing it here. Because we've done it here before. Just Security also reporting that the legal justification for not seeking congressional approval under the War Powers Act is the War Powers Act only pertains to putting troops in harm's way. Now, I'm talking about the airstrikes. I'm not talking about our troops on the ground in Colombia, Honduras, Guatemala, Ecuador. We're just finding out about that. But the legal justification for not seeking congressional approval under the War Powers Act is the War Powers Act, so the lawyers claim, only pertains to when our troops are in harm's way. And since these airstrikes are being conducted by unmanned vehicles, drones, there's no need for congressional approval since there are no troops in danger. So, this is how you prop up an authoritarian regime during a coup. You need lawyers and judges to misinterpret, mangle the laws that are already on the books before they have the power to write new laws. You know, the Nuremberg laws, the race laws, everything Hitler, the Enabling Act, everything Hitler did was legal because that's how you co-opt the bureaucracy. So there's a reason we don't know about U.S. ground operations in Central America and South America, which appear to be taking place. We don't know about it. It's the same reason we didn't know Oliver North was trading arms for hostages in Iran and then using the profits from that sale to fund the Contras in Nicaragua. There is no legal or constitutional justification for what Oliver North did. It was against the Constitution. It violated the Boland Amendment, which specifically said you cannot fund the Contras. So we didn't know about it. We found out through, I think, an Iranian newspaper in Beirut. I think that's how the story broke. When something is patently against the law, the executive branch will label it top secret, classified, not for public consumption. Why? Oh, it's for national security reasons. And again, none of this makes us more secure by keeping it top secret. It made Oliver North secure. It made Reagan, Bud McFarland secure. George Herbert Walker Bush secure. I am the state. If I'm not secure, the state is not secure. So everything that jeopardizes their power is kept secret in the name of national security. We now have a vice president who said that Mike Pence was wrong for certifying the election for Joe Biden on January 6th. We have a chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Dan Kane, entrepreneur. I've been over that. Somehow, while he was rising through the ranks of our military, he was an entrepreneur advising corporations in the defense sector. Of course, you would replace a black chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff with Dan Kane, entrepreneur. Dan Kane is the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Unlike General Mark Milley, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff on January 6th, Dan Kane will not say no to Trump. We have right now a Pentagon chief, that would be Pete Hegseth, willing to issue illegal orders to our military in the Persian Gulf, in the Caribbean, and in the Eastern Pacific. I ask you, why would Pete Hegseth so much as hesitate to issue illegal orders to our military in the lead up to January 3rd, when the 120th Congress is supposed to be sworn in? This is a different military than what we had in the lead up to January 6th. There are teams of lawyers inside the Justice Department, some of whom have left the Justice Department, people like Ed Martin, who defended the January 6ers and then was appointed U.S. Attorney for Washington, D.C., and then was head of the Pardon Office inside the Department of Justice, also in charge of the weaponization of our government office inside the Department of Justice. He's now left the Justice Department, and Donald Trump thanked him for his service and said, Ed Martin is now going out to practice law to protect the elections in November. We have teams of lawyers who never joined our Justice Department who are ready to pounce on the midterm results in any state where a House or Senate seat has been flipped from red to blue. They have the talking points. They've been trained to scream voter fraud and convince just enough people they're telling the truth. Wherever, this is what is going to happen on November 3rd, unless you get to work and make sure Democrats have a landslide. Wherever Republican candidates are leading in difficult swing districts, these lawyers will demand the counting of the votes stop. They're going to freeze the count when the Republicans are leading, and then they will challenge all the new ballots, which tend to be mail-in ballots that tend to break for the Democratic Party. It is how George W. Bush, remember the Brooks Brothers riot? It's how they stole the 2000 presidential election. When your guy is ahead, you stop the vote. They have gamed this down to voting precincts. And our FBI is led by Kash Patel, a world-class election denier. Our DOJ is led by Todd Blanche, a world-class election denier who says there are tons of evidence that the 2020 election was stolen. Can we see any of that evidence? No. This FBI knows which deep blue voting precincts are going to be trouble for Republicans. And they will have U.S. attorneys, they will have FBI agents on the ground going before Trump-friendly federal judges demanding search warrants to seize the ballots. Donald Trump has said, he looking back on 2020, he wished he listened to General Michael Flynn, who told him to seize the ballots. They will create, they're going to try to create a mirage, the red mirage. You know about this, the illusion that the Republicans were winning, and then as more votes mysteriously come in, they begin to lose, and that's what they say is election fraud. And they will do this only in districts precincts that went red to blue. And that starts on November 3rd, right after the polls close. Any Republican candidate who loses will immediately file challenges with the Secretary of State in that state, and they will also file challenges with the House of Representatives Administration Committee. They will demand, and this is going to happen unless it's a landslide for Democrats in the House. This is not going to happen in the Senate, but this is what's going to happen. Any Republican incumbent who is voted out of office will demand that the Democrat who defeated them not be seated when the new Congress enters the chamber on January 3rd. And here's where it gets incredibly dangerous. The Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, is Speaker until January 3rd. He will order his committees right after the midterms. If they lose the House, he will order all his committees to conduct kangaroo court hearings exposing non-existent voter fraud, like the Hunter Biden hearings. This will only happen in the House because the House is different from the Senate. The House gets dissolved, and so it's very dangerous. We literally shut down the entire House of Representatives on January 3rd. The Senate is never dissolved. It is permanently in session. They stagger their elections every 2 years. I think it's 33 members run for re-election every 2 years. But at no time is the Senate ever wiped clean. It's always in session. So if our side, the Democrats, take control of the Senate, this isn't going to happen in the Senate for many reasons, but that's one of them. The House of Representatives has a beginning and an end. The 119th Congress, that's currently in session, began on January 3rd, 2025, and it gets completely erased on January 3rd, 2027. New Congress, the 120th Congress comes in. Whatever rules from the 119th Congress all can be rewritten. It's as though unfinished business from the 119th Congress. It's a clean slate. Now, if you pay attention to the House of Representatives, it's pretty remarkable. It's been said the reason up until now America doesn't have too many revolutions and is because we have every 2 years inside the House of Representatives mini revolutions that we let off just enough revolutionary steam to prevent the Capitol dome from boiling over. It's kind of true, but it's important to remember that the Republicans know the House of Representatives ceases to exist on January 3rd every 2 years, and there's a twilight period. The only continuity from the 119th to the 120th House of Representatives by law is one person, the clerk. Now, you're going to hear, if it's a tight win for the Democrats, you're going to hear over and over again about the clerk. And at first, it's educational. I go, oh, that's kind of interesting. I didn't know this. Let's watch what happens and learn something. And while we're learning something, Trump is staging a coup d'etat. So it's better to know this stuff now. It is the House clerk who essentially gavels the 120th Congress in the House of Representatives to order. And the very first thing that clerk does is seat the new members of the House who, despite not being officially sworn in, those new members conduct all the business necessary by taking votes. They take all the votes necessary in the lead up to elect the new speaker. And once the speaker's elected, then the newly elected members of the House of Representatives, what is it all? Is it 435? They're sworn in, and then the House of Representatives is officially in session, and they can start passing laws. There are a few steps along the way to get to that point, and it requires people acting in good faith. And it requires a clerk to act in good faith. If in the lead up to January 3rd, when the 120th Congress is supposed to be sworn in, we start seeing losing Republican candidates challenging the seating of the Democrat who defeated them, what power does the clerk have other than to order the newly elected member of the House whose certification is being disputed? The clerk must order that newly elected member to step aside, meaning you can stay in the chamber, but you're not allowed to vote until we settle the disposition of your status. And how do we settle the disposition of your status? We hold a vote. Of whom? Of the House members who have yet to be sworn in and pick a speaker. They will vote to decide on whether these challenges to Democratic new House members are legitimate. So let's say Democrats win by 3. They have a 3-seat majority. How are you going to elect Hakeem Jeffries Speaker if the clerk is forced to order 3 new Democrats, four Democrats, to step aside? What do you do? Well, if you're a Democrat, you challenge the results of Republicans. So you just start canceling everybody out. I mean, that's what I think that, I don't know enough, but I think that's what I would do if I were Hakeem Jeffries. I would just start challenging the Republican winners. The clerk is not supposed to wield any power or influence. The same way the Vice President of the United States' role on January 6th is purely ceremonial. It's just count up the electors and declare the winner. But as we all know, all Mike Pence had to do was obey Trump's order on January 6th, and that would have changed everything. It doesn't matter what the Constitution says. It doesn't matter what norms dictate. All Mike Pence had to do was obey Donald Trump, and we know how that would have played out. I talked about it on my last show, which was I don't I don't recommend anybody listen to that one. Now, you're going to hear about the House clerk. And you're going to hear a term called the rogue clerk. And a clerk, like a speaker, is elected by members of the House of Representatives. But they can be fired. A clerk can be fired by the speaker, and the speaker can pick an acting clerk. He serves temporarily. So what if Mike Johnson starts holding these hearings and builds up a predicate and phony evidence of a stolen election and determines the Democrats stole another one? And remember, Mike Johnson is a world-class election denier. He wrote the amicus brief that was presented to the Supreme Court in the lead up to January 6th, asking them to reverse the election results. It was Mike Johnson who wrote that amicus brief. So he's an election denier. He'll have no problem stealing the House of Representatives, and he'll stir up fake evidence in the lead up to January 3rd and say, you know what, I'm firing the clerk and I'm putting J.D. Vance in charge, or I'm putting myself in charge. That might be questionable. I'm putting somebody we can trust in charge of the House to be the clerk. I will keep coming back to this because if Democrats win back the House, and it's starting to look like that's a distinct possibility, this Republican Party really has nothing better to do than prevent Democrats from taking control. But it's not like they're going to do anything. They have no other purpose than to steal an election, to gum up the works. And remember, this is a White House, a Department of Justice, an FBI, and a Pentagon run by rogue commissars, more than willing to obey and transmit illegal orders for many reasons, but especially because they have a vested interest in not getting investigated and or prosecuted should Democrats gain power. Now, I'm going to talk about this, and I should wrap it up, but if I don't talk about it now, when you watch what's going to happen or is happening, critical thinking mandates that you always ask, why? Why are they doing this? The head of the FBI, Kash Patel, election denier, announced this week that law enforcement was able to prevent the Chinese government from hacking our government's top infrastructure, from the Federal Reserve to NASA to the Senate, the Department of Justice. Big announcement. We stopped the Chinese from hacking the federal government's computers. Now they were very careful, the DOJ and Kash Patel, very careful not to mention that the Chinese hacked the Department of Homeland Security, which monitors our elections to make sure there's no foreign interference. Why? Why did he leave out that the Chinese didn't try to hack the Department of Homeland Security? Because he's trying to build credibility. It's part of the predicate being laid down by the Trump administration that the Chinese hacked the midterms. But you can't spring that on the American people until you first start giving them evidence that we caught the Chinese trying to hack every other part of our government. you're going to hear a steady stream of reports coming out of the FBI and the DOJ that Chinese-sponsored hackers are trying to manipulate our government's computers, but they will never say the elections, at least not yet. While the Justice Department will talk about all the attempts by the Chinese government to hack our computers, they won't mention the elections. All they need to do is start convincing Americans that the Chinese are infiltrating government computers. You have Trump already claiming the Chinese are hacking elections. So the FBI and the DOJ, it doesn't look good for them to start saying that now. That will make people suspicious. So the FBI, DOJ for the next 6 weeks will just say the Chinese are hacking our computers. And what that will do is eventually lead some people to conclude, well, wait a second. If the Chinese government is trying to hack into the Department of Energy or the Social Security Administration, then of course Donald Trump is telling the truth when he says the Chinese are hacking our elections. See, this is brilliant. You allow the American people to make the connection, or think they're making the connection all by themselves. We're not there yet. We'll be there soon. The FBI, probably not the military, will be the first one seizing ballots in any swing district that flipped red to blue. The FBI, the DOJ will demand, they'll get warrants from friendly federal judges to see those ballots, to seize those ballots, and stop the count. Because if you can, that's how Bush became president in 2000. They stopped the count while he was ahead. And they will insist we have to seize these ballots and examine them for proof of foreign interference. And it all falls under the umbrella of national security. It's classified. It's top secret. We can't tell you how we know that the Chinese hacked these ballots. We just know. So, in the lead up to the midterms, when you see something that you don't understand, ask yourself, why? This is confusing to me. I don't understand this. Why? Back on January 28th of this year, Tulsi Gabbard, and I didn't understand this, but over time I came to figure it out. Back on January 28th of this year, Tulsi Gabbard, who at the time was Director of National Intelligence, as Director of National Intelligence, you oversee more than a dozen of our spy agencies. For some reason, she showed up outside the Fulton County, Georgia election center, along with the FBI, which was seizing hundreds of boxes of ballots from the 2020 presidential election. And I was thinking, why is she there? What is that? Well, it was a test run for November of this year. How do we seize ballots? Can we get away with it? What's the process? They seized ballots from 2020. And the next day, Tulsi Gabbard, the Director of National Intelligence, along with the FBI's Deputy Director, showed up inside the FBI's Atlanta field office, got on the phone, and briefed Donald Trump on the raid. So when does this is not The President of the United States is ordering the FBI and the head of the National Intelligence, to go down to Georgia, where he lost the 2020 presidential election, and start seizing ballots. And then they have no problem openly talking to Donald Trump on the phone about, yes, Mr. President, Gabbard, the head of National Intelligence, said she went down to Georgia and was present for the raid. She was there on behest of our president because he ordered her to look into election security. That's why we're told they seized the 2020 ballots, to see whether or not the Chinese had hacked those ballots. Trump lost Fulton County. They didn't seize the 2022 ballots from Fulton County, where Trump wasn't running. They didn't seize the 2024 ballots when Trump won Georgia. They only seized the 2020 ballots because that was the election Trump lost. And by sending the director of national intelligence down to Georgia, Trump can claim part of this investigation revolved around foreign interference in our elections. Why? Why does he want to push the idea that the Chinese are hacking our elections? Why? Because that involves national security. It involves the director of national intelligence. And if it involves our director of national intelligence, everything is classified, meaning the American people and Congress are on a need-to-know basis. We only find out what we're allowed to know. This is why it's so easy for presidents to go to war, because it's national security. It's classified. The president cherry picks intelligence that only proves his case for the war. You only have classified material. I'm going to release it. But he only releases phony classified material to prove why we need to go to war. And he'll turn it over to the media, to Congress, the American people. They're given an overwhelming preponderance of false evidence that Iran is days away from having a nuclear weapon, that Iran is days away from attacking our troops in the Persian Gulf, that Venezuela is days away from launching a terrorist attack on our nation's soil, that Iraq was behind 9/11. We have evidence that Afghanistan was behind 9/11, or that Saddam Hussein has weapons of mass destruction. Cherry pick intelligence that makes the case for war. And if the intelligence doesn't exist, make it up. We go to war. We're in a constant state of war because everything is classified before we go to war, and we inform the American people on a need to know basis. We've mastered this. You go to war by controlling the flow of information. And you can really only control the flow of information if everything is top secret, if everything is classified. And of course, you're surrounded by loyalists who won't leak to the media. Donald Trump isn't waging war on Iran. He isn't waging war on narco terrorists. He is waging war on America. He's already told us that repeatedly. Repeatedly. He says it's the enemy within. Donald Trump repeatedly says no foreign power can ever destroy us. Only the enemy within can. And by claiming the Chinese have hacked our ballots, he can order the FBI to seize any ballots he wants in the name of national security. He's got a loyalist right now as head of national intelligence, Clayton. A loyalist running the CIA, Radcliffe. They're going to say, we have classified evidence that the Chinese have hacked our voting machines. Can we see the evidence? Well, we can only show you some of that evidence, but it's classified. Once something's classified, we have to take their word. In other words, they are right now laying the groundwork to make the case that any district that flipped from red to blue, that was stolen. And you're just going to have to take our word that the Chinese did it because it's classified. Nobody can leak the truth in this administration. It is also the Department of Homeland Security tasked with election integrity. Now, I'm going to tell you something that's absolutely incredible. It is the Department of Homeland Security's job to make sure none of our voting machines are hacked by foreign actors. That is precisely why Donald Trump fired practically everyone inside the Department of Homeland Security whose job it is to investigate election security. He's not going to get burned the way he did in 2020 when Chris Krebs, his very own chief of federal election security inside the Department of Homeland Security, Chris Krebs, testified before Congress in the lead up to January 6th that 2020 was the most secure presidential election in American history, that Trump lost. There was no voter fraud. I'm Donald Trump's election integrity officer. He lost. And he's paying a price for that now. He's being investigated by the Department of Justice. Krebs was in charge of the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, housed inside the Department of Homeland Security. It is this agency's job to investigate election integrity, to make sure no foreign government hacked our voting machines. You remember what Trump was claiming. Italy, Venezuela hacked our voting machines. According to Kash Patel, this week, China is hacking all our computers. According to Donald Trump, Joe Biden won because China hacked our machines. Of course, they didn't hack our machines in 2024 when he defeated Harris. But he's put in place a narrative that China is trying to manipulate election results so Democrats win. Well, if that had a modicum of truth, one would think Trump would spend more money on election integrity. You know, the same way he's spending billions on ICE to prevent something else that isn't happening. You would think if China's hacking our elections, you're going to beef up the part of Homeland Security that prevents that from happening. But no, Trump has already fired 1/3 of the people inside the Department of Homeland Security whose job it is to prevent countries like China from hacking our voting machines. He keeps saying the Chinese are hacking our voting machines. Brad Raffensperger is still Georgia's Secretary of State. He's in charge of Georgia's elections down there. He's a Republican. He recently said, since he's been Secretary of State going back to at least 2020, every election cycle he would get updates, alerts on possible attempts by foreign governments trying to hack our voting machines. Those alerts would come from Department of Homeland Security. He says this year he has gotten 0 updates. 0. Nobody from the Department of Homeland Security is advising this Republican Secretary of State of Georgia to be on the lookout for rogue bots poisoning our voting machines. And yet Trump claims the Chinese have hacked our voting machines before, and they're doing it now. And of course, it's going to be every voting machine inside a precinct where a seat flipped from red to blue. Wait, it gets even worse. The 2027 budget is due on October 1st. And the White House each year kicks off the budget making process by proposing the first budget. Guess how much the White House allocated for the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency? This is the agency Chris Krebs ran. This is the agency in charge of making sure our voting machines aren't hacked by the Chinese. Guess how much Donald Trump proposed for the 2027 budget to spend on this agency? Would you like to guess? 0. Nada. Zip. Wants to get rid of the Election Integrity Office inside Homeland Security. Why? Always ask why. Because when you have thousands of people in the Department of Homeland Security looking into the possibility that China might have hacked our elections, then you have thousands of people just like Chris Krebs who will either publicly or privately tell the media or Congress that the president is lying. The Chinese did not hack a single voting machine, and I've got thousands of employees willing to present all the evidence necessary to show you they didn't. Trump's MO? Fire everybody. Fire anybody who can prove that I'm lying. So, you get rid of the Department of Homeland Security's Election Integrity Department, and you transfer election integrity to our spy agencies. That's what he's doing. Because if you keep it inside the Department of Homeland Security, it's really hard to classify evidence. But if it's a matter of national intelligence, it's a matter of national security, you can claim the Chinese hacked the election. And I'd love to show you the proof, but it's classified. Now, they're trying to fill Homeland Security only with the loyalists. They're rooting out possible whistleblowers. Right now, Homeland Security and the FBI have become notorious for what are called snap lie detector tests, where somebody high up in the FBI, somebody high up in the Department of Homeland Security, when they least expect it, is ordered to withstand 6 hours of intensive questioning hooked up to a lie detector machine. And they're put in a very small room, and the lie detectors are physically painful, and they're panic-inducing. You get into a small room, not well ventilated, and you're hooked up to a machine being asked questions like, have you ever said anything negative about our president? Have you ever said anything negative about Kash Patel or the current head of the Department of Homeland Security? These are not lie detector tests. They're testing your loyalty. The Secret Service this week just put 3 employees working inside the communications staff of the Secret Service on administrative leave. Why? They're accused of possibly leaking to the press. So these are members of the communications staff of the Secret Service. The chief spokesperson for the Secret Service is named Anthony Guglielmi. His job is to speak to the press. He's just been placed on administrative leave while an internal investigation is conducted to determine whether the man in charge of talking to the media has been talking to the media. They are sealing this shut. They're sealing the Pentagon. We don't have reporters allowed inside the Pentagon. They are sealing this government shut. They just replaced the editor of Stars and Stripes, which covers the military. It's supposed to be an independent newspaper, kind of like an inspector general that investigates the Pentagon. Well, they broke the story about what was going on inside the USS Abraham Lincoln. Editor-in-chief just got fired. They are sealing it shut because the American people and the soldiers are not allowed to know that Iran won. Because Donald Trump this week declared victory. Stars and Stripes is contradicting that. Yesterday, Trump took to social media and he posted an image of him fighting Iran, and the message is mission accomplished. Mission accomplished. If by achieving record profits for the oil companies, yeah, well done, sir. He's claiming he won in Iran. Why? How does he say that? How does he justify that? He says, well, Iran's got record inflation. Their economy is about to collapse. Their soldiers are exhausted. They're all out of weapons. And if I'm not mistaken, those are the very same examples Iran cites when they want to prove they defeated America. 6 months of war with Iran, and all we can do to defeat them is organize economic D-Day, insisting every country around the world stop trading with Iran. China said, I don't think so. I don't think we'll be taking orders from you. And Russia said, we're doing very well with Iran. Thank you. It's not going well. It's not going well. We're supposed to be assisting Ukraine in its war with Russia, but instead, Ukraine is assisting us in our war with Iran. A jet belonging to our CIA chief, John Radcliffe, was spotted on the tarmac in Moscow. The Kremlin confirmed that Radcliffe was, in fact, visiting Moscow. He didn't meet with Putin, but he did meet with his own counterpart. That would be a toy poodle, I think. That's what John Radcliffe is. I don't know. I think he met with this guy, Russian intelligence foreign spy chief Sergei Narishkin. I don't know what was discussed. Perhaps living arrangements for Donald Trump after the 2026 midterms. If it's a landslide, I think Donald Trump is going to need a place to live. What was the conversation about? We think it's over Russia supplying satellite photographs, telling Iran where our soldiers are stationed. Of course, our only naval base in the Middle East has been rendered non-operational. The minute the fighting started, Iran destroyed it. Our CIA headquarters in Saudi Arabia destroyed. We can't protect our troops in the Middle East, and Russia probably told our CIA chief, well, what are you going to do? You're helping kill our troops in Ukraine. From what we're hearing, the CIA was promised that Russia would no longer help Iran attack our soldiers. Why would Putin say that if he didn't mean it? And then Trump reported that Vladimir Putin assured him that he would never attack a NATO country. That's what we know. We also know that the Trump administration put out a formal request that Ukraine refrain from drone and missile strikes on and around Moscow while our CIA chief was there. Ukraine, I mean, it's a tough war. This week they hit 16 Russian targets, refineries, airfields. They're teaching us. We even lost a war game to Ukraine that was staged in Germany back in May. Things aren't going well in this country. They're not good. I'm David Feldman, reminding you to stay strong and protect the weak. If you enjoyed any of this, please hit the like button. Please share it. Please, I know it's the end of summer, but everything I just told you, if it's not a landslide, I just prepped you. I just told you the plan. So file it away. Because if we don't get out there and win the Senate and win the House by 40 seats, this is what is in store for us. And it's already mobilizing. It is a coup means they haven't already taken power. So I guess you can't call it a coup. That already has happened. Go to davidfeldmanshow.com, hit the contact button. If you want to read what I'm reading, hit the show prep menu. You can read. It's refreshed every 15 minutes. These are the articles that sit on my desk as I prepare my show. And you can host your own podcast. Hit the show notes menu and download my notes, and it's all the facts and figures that go into prepping this show. If I made any mistakes, contact me over at davidfeldmanshow.com. Thank you to Bob and Mila. If you're still there in the chat room, sorry I went so long, but yeah, I don't know what to tell you. Thank you, everyone.